I spotted an alien woman handing out looking for a partner, flyers. No conditions at all, Ethan was just another face in the busy crowd of the city's downtown area. The streets were crowded with people hustling to get to work, rushing to catch buses, or just trying to get through another busy day. The noise was constant, the sounds of cars honking, people chatting, and the occasional street performer playing music in the background. It was a typical Tuesday morning, the kind where nothing special seemed to happen until it did. As Ethan was walking along the sidewalk, something caught his eye. Standing by the edge of the crowd was a woman, tall and striking, handing out flyers. It wasn't unusual for people to hand out flyers in the busy city center, but something about this woman stood out. She was different. She wasn't dressed in the typical attire for someone handing out promotional material. She wasn't wearing a uniform or a company logo. Instead, she wore a simple outfit, loose, earth-colored clothes that looked oddly timeless, like they didn't belong to any particular era. But what really caught his attention were her features. The woman was beautiful, but not in the way most people were used to seeing. Her skin had an unusual tint to it, something between lavender and violet, subtle yet striking. Her eyes, glowing softly in a way that felt otherworldly, seemed to pierce through the usual noise of the street. They had a depth to them that felt like they belonged to someone who had seen more than just this planet. Her hair was long, flowing in waves like liquid silver, catching the sunlight in a way that made it shimmer. Despite the way she stood out, she didn't seem out of place. There was a strange comfort to her presence, as though she belonged here among the crowd. As he walked closer, Ethan noticed the flyers she was handing out. They weren't like any flyers he'd seen before. There was no advertisement, no product being sold. Just a simple line printed in bold letters. "Looking for a partner, no conditions, will you join me?" The words were strange, almost too direct, and for a moment Ethan wasn't sure if he had read them correctly. It wasn't the kind of thing you saw every day, especially in the middle of a busy city. Curiosity got the better of him, and before he knew it, he found himself walking up to the woman. She had just handed a flyer to another person and was about to turn around when she saw him approaching. Her gaze met his, and for a brief second, it felt as though time had slowed down. There was something about her eyes, calm, knowing, and almost inviting, that made Ethan feel like he had been drawn into something much bigger than this moment. "Would you like a flyer?" she asked, her voice soft but clear. The accent was unlike anything he had heard before, melodic, almost musical, but at the same time strangely familiar. Ethan blinked, unsure of what to say. He had so many questions running through his mind, but none of them felt like the right thing to ask. He had never been one to strike up conversations with strangers, especially not strangers like her. But there was something about her that made him want to know more. Sure," he said, reaching out and taking the flyer from her hand. As he looked at the paper, it didn't seem real. The flyer was simple, white with black text and no logo or branding, just the words. He read them again, wondering if there was some hidden meaning he was missing. "Looking for a partner, no conditions." He looked up at the woman, unsure of how to respond. What does this mean?" he asked, feeling a little foolish for even asking. He wasn't sure what he expected, but it definitely wasn't this. The woman smiled softly, as though she had expected the question. "It means exactly what it says," she replied, her voice steady and calm. "I am looking for a partner, someone to join me." She didn't elaborate further, as if the words themselves should be enough. Ethan felt a mix of confusion and intrigue. Who was she? What kind of partner was she looking for? And why no conditions? Everything about this encounter felt odd, but at the same time, there was something compelling about her presence. It wasn't just the way she looked, though that was certainly striking. It was the feeling she gave off, a sense of calm and certainty that made him feel like there was more to this than just a random street encounter. "Are you from around here?" Ethan asked, trying to make sense of it all. "I've never seen anyone like you before." The woman's smile remained, but there was something knowing in her expression, as though she understood exactly what he meant. "I'm not from around here," she said softly, "but I've come to offer something, to give something that your world is ready for." Ethan's mind raced. He was about to ask another question when the woman spoke again. "Don't worry," she said, her eyes meeting his once more. "There are no strings attached, just an offer. Take some time, think about it. When you're ready, come find me." Before he could say anything else, she turned and began walking away, fading into the crowd as easily as she had appeared. Ethan stood there for a moment, staring at the flyer in his hand, his mind spinning with questions. What did she mean by join me? Who was she really? And what did this all mean for him? As he stood there, still processing what had just happened, he couldn't shake the feeling that this encounter was the beginning of something much bigger, something he couldn't yet understand. And for the first time in a long while, he felt the stirrings of something he hadn't felt in years. Curiosity, excitement, and a deep sense that he was about to step into a world that was completely different from the one he knew. Ethan couldn't shake the strange encounter from his mind. The woman, Aliana, and her mysterious flyer kept swirling in his thoughts. Every time he tried to focus on something else, he would find himself staring at the piece of paper in his hand. Looking for a partner. No conditions. He couldn't stop thinking about what that could mean. It wasn't just a weird message. It felt like an invitation to something bigger than he could comprehend. He tried to brush it off, telling himself it was just another oddity in the city, but the more he thought about it, the more something inside him wanted to understand. Who was she? What was she offering? And why no conditions? The questions piled up, each one pushing him further into uncertainty. The next day, Ethan couldn't focus on anything. He went through his usual routine, grabbed coffee at the cafe, worked his regular 9-to-5 job, met with some friends for dinner, but nothing felt right. He kept imagining the woman standing in the middle of the street, those glowing eyes locking with his, and her calm voice saying, "I'm looking for a partner." He knew he couldn't leave it there. He had to go back and find her. That afternoon, after work, Ethan found himself walking again through the city streets. His mind was set. He was going to find Aliana and ask her about the flyer. It wasn't like him to chase after things he didn't understand, but for some reason he felt a pull. A deep, almost magnetic pull that made it impossible to ignore. As he walked past the same cafe where they had first crossed paths, he looked around but didn't see her. He was beginning to think he had imagined the whole thing when, just as he was about to turn down another street, he spotted her. There she was, standing at the same spot where they had met before, near the entrance of a small park. She was holding out more of the same flyers, her eyes scanning the crowd. Aliana saw him before he had a chance to approach. She smiled softly and walked toward him, her movements graceful and confident. There was no hesitation in her steps, no uncertainty. She seemed like someone who knew exactly what she was doing and where she was going. "Back again, Ethan," she said, her voice as calm and soothing as he remembered. It wasn't an accusation or a surprise. It was as though she had been expecting him. I don't know why I'm here," Ethan confessed, his words tumbling out awkwardly. I couldn't stop thinking about you and the flyer. I need to understand more. What does it mean? Why no conditions? What's your offer?" Aliana didn't seem surprised by his sudden questions. She took a small step back and gestured for him to follow her as she began walking toward the park. "The answer isn't simple," she said as they walked, "but I'll tell you everything." "I've been waiting for someone like you to ask." Ethan followed, still feeling a mixture of confusion and curiosity. The city around them seemed to fade into the background as they entered the park. The noises of traffic and people disappeared, replaced by the soft rustling of trees and the distant sound of birds. The park was quiet, almost peaceful, and Ethan felt strangely at ease. It wasn't the kind of calm he expected from a city park. It was something deeper, something that made him feel like he was entering a different world entirely. They reached a small bench at the edge of the park, and Aliana sat down, motioning for him to join her. He sat down cautiously, still unsure of what to expect. Aliana studied him for a moment before speaking again. "I am not from your world, Ethan," she said softly, her violet eyes meeting his. "I come from a planet far beyond your solar system. I've been sent here to find humans who are open to something different." Ethan's heart raced. He had suspected it, but hearing her say it out loud made it all too real. "You're an alien?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. Aliana nodded, her gaze steady. "Yes. But I am not here to invade or cause harm. My species has been watching Earth for a long time, and we've studied your people. We've learned a lot about your world, but there is still so much we don't understand." Ethan sat there, stunned. He had read stories about aliens, seen movies, but nothing could have prepared him for this moment. The woman sitting beside him wasn't just someone from another country or a different culture. She was from another planet entirely. "I don't understand," he said, his mind still trying to catch up. "Why me? Why are you looking for a partner?" Eliana's smile was soft, but there was a hint of something deeper in her eyes. I've seen many humans in my time here, and I've learned that your world is on the brink of something great. But you are also facing challenges that are difficult to overcome. My species believes that humans and our kind could create something extraordinary together. Ethan frowned. Something extraordinary? What do you mean? Hybrids, Eliana said simply. We believe that if we join with humans, we can create a new generation of beings who possess the best qualities of both species. This hybrid offspring could bring about peace, understanding, and growth. It could be the key to bridging the gap between our worlds. Ethan's mind whirled. He had thought she was offering something simple, maybe a partnership or an adventure. But this was something much bigger. A new generation, peace between worlds. It sounded like something out of a sci-fi novel, not a flyer handed out on a street corner. Is that what the flyer is about? Ethan asked. You're asking people to join you and create these hybrids. Eliana nodded. Yes, that is part of it, but it's more than just about creating hybrids. It's about breaking the boundaries that have kept your people confined to this one planet. It's about offering you the chance to be a part of something greater than Earth. Ethan took a deep breath, trying to process everything she had said. He had been expecting something odd, maybe even unbelievable, but this was beyond anything he could have imagined. Yet there was a part of him, deep down, that couldn't help but feel a sense of excitement. This wasn't just an alien encounter. It was the start of something new, something that could change everything. But why me? Ethan asked again. Why do you think I'm the right person for this? Eliana looked at him with a quiet understanding. Because you are open, because you ask the right questions, and because I believe you have the potential to help guide this process to be part of the change. Ethan felt his heart race again. It was clear that Eliana wasn't asking for just anyone. She was looking for someone who could understand her mission, someone who was willing to take the leap into the unknown. And despite all the doubts swirling in his mind, a part of him wanted to say yes. This was a chance at something far beyond his ordinary life, something that could shape the future of the world or even the universe. I need time, Ethan said finally, his voice shaky. I can't just decide something like this on a whim. Eliana smiled again, that same understanding look in her eyes. Take all the time you need, but remember the opportunity will always be here waiting for you to choose. With that, she stood up and began walking away, disappearing into the quiet paths of the park. Ethan stayed seated for a long while, staring at the flyer in his hand. He had come here looking for answers, and now he had more questions than ever. But one thing was certain, his life would never be the same. Ethan couldn't get Eliana out of his mind. It had been days since their conversation in the park, and yet the words she had spoken still echoed in his head. Her message was simple, but its implications were enormous. The idea of creating a new generation of hybrid beings, combining the best of both humans and her species, was something that felt almost impossible to grasp. And yet, the more he thought about it, the more intrigued he became. Could this really be the future of humanity? A chance to break free from Earth and join something bigger than what he had ever imagined. He had tried to move on with his life, but nothing felt right. Work felt dull. Conversations with friends seemed shallow. Nothing held his attention the way that brief interaction with Eliana had. The flyer she had given him was still sitting on his desk, a constant reminder that there was a whole other world, another possibility, waiting for him to explore. He had done some research, but the more he dug into the idea of extraterrestrial life, the more questions arose. He found accounts of UFO sightings, ancient myths of visitors from the stars, but nothing concrete. There were theories, speculations, and stories, but nothing that would explain how Eliana could be real, how her claim of being from another planet could make any sense. And then there was the most pressing question of all: why him? That night, as Ethan sat in his small apartment, flipping through a book on the possibility of alien life, his phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, and for a moment his heart skipped a beat. It was a message from an unknown number. It's Eliana. I was hoping we could talk again. I've thought about our conversation, and I believe you are ready for the next step. Let me know if you want to meet. The message was simple, but it made his pulse quicken. Ethan wasn't sure why, but deep down, he knew this wasn't just a random message. It was an invitation to something huge. It was the opportunity he had been waiting for, whether he realized it or not. He immediately replied, I'm ready. Where should we meet? Her response came quickly. There's a quiet cafe on the corner of 3rd and Pine. Come at 7 p.m. The next few hours felt like they stretched on forever. Ethan tried to calm his nerves, but it wasn't easy. As the evening approached, he found himself pacing around his apartment, trying to gather his thoughts. This wasn't just another date or meeting. This was the beginning of something extraordinary, something that could change his life forever. When 7 p.m. finally arrived, Ethan walked to the cafe, his heart racing with each step. The streetlights cast long shadows on the pavement, and the air felt cooler than usual. The cafe was a small, cozy place, the kind that seemed to have been forgotten by time. The smell of freshly brewed coffee greeted him as he entered, and for a moment he felt like he had stepped into another world, a world that wasn't quite the same as his own. Eliana was already there, sitting at a corner table by the window. She was dressed simply, but in a way that made her look out of place. Her skin seemed to glow softly in the dim light, and her silver hair shimmered in a way that caught his attention immediately. She looked up as he approached, and a warm smile spread across her face. "Ethan," she said softly, her voice as calm as he remembered. "I'm glad you could make it." He nodded, feeling slightly out of his depth. "I didn't know what to expect. This whole thing, it's a lot to process." "I understand," Eliana replied, "but you don't need to worry. You're not alone in this. I wouldn't have contacted you if I didn't think you had the potential to understand what's at stake." Ethan sat down across from her, still unsure of what to say. Eliana seemed completely at ease, as if meeting someone like him was just another day in her life. She didn't seem like a stranger anymore. She felt like someone he had known for a long time, even though this was only their second meeting. "I've been thinking about what you said," Ethan began, looking down at the table for a moment, trying to collect his thoughts. "About the hybrids, about combining your species with humans. It sounds unbelievable, but at the same time it feels like something we need." Eliana smiled softly, as though she had been waiting for him to understand. "Exactly. That's why I came here. I believe your people have the potential for greatness, but you're trapped by your limitations. My people have learned so much about the universe, but we've always struggled with connection. That's why we think a union between us could bring about incredible change, not just for our worlds, but for yours as well." Ethan listened closely, his mind racing as he absorbed her words. "And you think I'm the one who can help make this happen?" he asked, still trying to make sense of everything. "You have the right kind of spirit," Eliana said. "You're open to change. You're curious, not afraid to ask questions. That's rare in your world. Most people won't even consider the possibility of something like this. But you're different." Ethan leaned back in his chair, staring at her. He had never thought of himself as different, but hearing her say it made him wonder. Maybe he was. Maybe he was the one who could help bridge the gap between their worlds. But the weight of the decision was heavy. Could he really make this leap? Could he join Eliana in this quest to create something new? "What exactly do you need from me?" Ethan asked, his voice steady now. "How can I help?" Eliana's gaze softened, and for the first time he saw a hint of vulnerability in her eyes. "I'm looking for someone who can stand beside me, someone who can lead the way for others to follow. I don't want to force anyone into this. It has to be a choice. But I believe you are someone who can see the bigger picture." Ethan took a deep breath. The choice wasn't easy, and he knew that. But he also realized that this was the kind of opportunity that could never come again. This wasn't just about him. It was about the future of humanity, the future of their world, and the future of a race of beings who had been waiting for something like this. He looked at Eliana, and for the first time since meeting her, he felt like he understood. He understood that she wasn't just offering a partnership, she was offering a chance to change everything, to help humanity take a step into the unknown, to become part of something greater than they had ever imagined. "I'll do it," Ethan said, his voice firm. "I'll help. I'll stand with you." Eliana's smile returned, brighter this time. "I knew you would. Together we can make something incredible happen, but you must be ready. This is only the beginning." Ethan felt a mix of excitement and fear wash over him. He was ready, or at least he thought he was. There was no turning back now. His life, his world, was about to change in ways he could never have imagined. Ethan's decision to join Eliana had set his life on a path he never could have predicted. The days after their meeting were a whirlwind of new experiences, new thoughts, and new challenges. He had agreed to help to stand by her, but what that really meant was still unclear. Eliana had promised him that this was only the beginning, but the weight of the decision was beginning to settle heavily on him. He spent his days at work, still going through the motions, but his mind was elsewhere. Every spare moment he had, he found himself thinking about the future, about what the hybrids would look like, about the changes that were coming, and about what he had agreed to. Could he really lead humanity into this new era? Was he ready for the responsibility? Eliana had told him to take his time to think, but time was moving faster than he expected. Every time they spoke, she seemed to reveal more of her world, more of her people, and more of the vision she had for Earth's future. She was patient with him, never rushing him, but there was a quiet urgency in her eyes whenever they met. They agreed to meet again the following week, this time in a different part of the city. Ethan had never thought much about the places he visited, but now everything seemed to carry weight. The cafes, the parks, the quiet streets, they all felt like places of decision-making, places where the future was being written. When he arrived at the meeting place, a small bookstore tucked away on a quiet street corner, Eliana was already there. She was standing by the entrance, her silver hair catching the light as she greeted him with a soft smile. "Ethan," she said warmly, her voice always calm, always inviting. "I'm glad you came. We need to talk." Ethan nodded and followed her inside. The bookstore was a quiet, cozy place with shelves filled to the brim with books in every language imaginable. The air smelled faintly of old paper and wood, and the low hum of quiet conversation made it feel like a world away from the bustling city outside. Eliana led him to a table near the back, where they sat down. She ordered them both coffee, Ethan's usual black and Eliana's something strange that Ethan had never heard of, something that tasted like herbs and flowers. "We've made some progress," she said as they sipped their drinks. "The hybrid project is moving forward. My people have started the preliminary stages of integration, but we need the right people to take the next step. You're one of the first humans to be part of this, Ethan. Your involvement is more important than you realize." Ethan shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "I still don't fully understand what this is going to look like. What exactly are we doing here? I agreed to help, but what comes next?" Eliana paused, setting her cup down carefully before looking him in the eyes. "We're creating a future, Ethan. A future where humans and my species can live together, where we can help each other grow. The hybrids will be the beginning, yes, but it's not just about creating a new generation of beings. It's about breaking the cycle of fear and misunderstanding between your people and ours. The hybrids will serve as bridges. They will show your world that there is more out there, that you're not alone." Ethan listened carefully. It wasn't hard to understand her words. They were simple enough. But the gravity of the task she was speaking of still weighed on him. "And how exactly do we do that? How do we make this happen?" Eliana's eyes sparkled with a quiet intensity. "We begin with you. You are part of the key. We'll help guide you, teach you what you need to know, but you need to be ready to step forward and embrace this new role. It's not just about creating hybrids. It's about creating understanding. If we're going to bridge the gap between our worlds, it starts with someone like you." Ethan felt a strange sense of calm wash over him. The uncertainty he had been carrying around for days seemed to dissipate, if only for a moment. Eliana wasn't asking him to be something he was. She wasn't expecting him to be perfect. She was just asking him to help show others that the world they had built was only a small part of something much bigger. But just as quickly, the weight of what she had said returned. This wasn't just about him. This was about the future of both their species. It was a responsibility he had never imagined he would carry, and yet, somehow, it was his to bear. Eliana noticed the shift in his expression and reached out, her hand resting gently on the table. "I know this is a lot to take in, but you are not alone in this, Ethan. You don't have to do everything on your own. There are others who will help. We will all help, but you are the one who will lead." Ethan swallowed hard, his mind racing. Lead. It was a word that carried so much weight. He had never seen himself as a leader, never thought of himself as someone who could guide others through something as monumental as this. But Eliana believed in him, and there was something about the way she looked at him, something in her eyes that made him believe he could do it. "Okay," he said quietly. "I'm ready. I want to help. I want to be part of this." Eliana smiled, her expression softening. "I knew you would be. You have a heart for this, Ethan. You'll see. Together we will build something that will change the future." Over the next few weeks, Ethan found himself drawn deeper into Eliana's world. She introduced him to more of her people who were scattered around the world, quietly working to prepare for the coming of the hybrids. There were other humans involved, too, some who had been chosen for their curiosity, their willingness to step into the unknown. It was strange to meet them. They seemed normal, yet there was something different about them, something that made Ethan feel like he had joined a secret movement, one that had the power to change the course of history. But as the days passed, Ethan began to notice something unsettling. Not everyone was on board with the plan. There were whispers, rumors of resistance groups forming, of humans who didn't trust Aliana's people and didn't want any part in the hybrid project. Some of the resistance groups were small, but their messages were growing louder. There were protests in the streets. People were afraid. They didn't understand what was happening, and they didn't want to be part of it. Ethan's unease grew. The world around him was changing, but not everyone was ready for that change. How could he lead when so many people were scared, when so many people didn't want to listen? One night, after a long day of meetings with Aliana's team, Ethan found himself standing at the window of his apartment, looking out over the city. The lights of the city stretched out before him, a sea of bright, flashing signs and dark alleys. The world felt the same, but he knew it was. It was changing, and he was part of that change. But as much as he wanted to believe in the future that Aliana had shown him, he couldn't ignore the fear he was feeling. The fear that maybe, just maybe, humanity wasn't ready for what was coming. The next morning he met Aliana again. This time the conversation was different. "There's resistance," Ethan said quietly. "People are afraid, they don't understand." Aliana's face grew serious. "I know," she said softly, "but fear is natural, it's part of the process. Change is always met with resistance, but we must not let that stop us. We are building something that will benefit everyone, even those who don't see it yet. And you, Ethan, will help show them the way." Ethan nodded, though his heart still felt heavy. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but it was the road he had chosen, and now there was no turning back. "I'm ready," he said, his voice firm. "I'll help, I'll lead." And with that, he took his first steps into a future that was no longer just his own. Ethan had never imagined he would be here, sitting in a room with people from all over the world, all united by one purpose: to change the future. He could still hardly believe that it had all started with a simple flyer handed out on a busy street corner. A flyer that had turned his life upside down, leading him to this moment. The meetings had become regular. Every week he sat with Aliana and the others, discussing the future of the hybrid project. It was a huge responsibility, but over time, Ethan had begun to feel a sense of clarity. He understood now what his role was: to be a leader not just of the project, but of the people who would follow it. But as the days went by, he realized that leading wasn't as simple as he had imagined. People were scared. They were afraid of the unknown. Fear of the hybrids, fear of the changes that were coming, fear of what it would mean for their world. It wasn't just the resistance groups he had heard about, there was fear everywhere. People were suspicious. They didn't trust Aliana or her people. And even though he had stood by her, even though he had agreed to help, a small part of him couldn't shake the fear too. What if they were wrong? What if the hybrids were not the answer? What if humanity wasn't ready for the change Aliana promised? One evening, after a long and exhausting day, Ethan found himself walking alone through the quiet streets of the city. He needed time to think. He had come so far, but now everything felt uncertain. The weight of the responsibility was heavy on his shoulders. The fear he had pushed aside for so long now seemed impossible to ignore. As he walked, his mind replayed the conversations he had had with Aliana. She had always been calm, confident, sure of what she was doing, but even she had acknowledged the challenges they would face. Resistance wasn't just something he had heard about, it was real. The protests had been getting bigger, the voices of those who were afraid growing louder. How could they move forward when the world around them was divided? His thoughts were interrupted when he saw a familiar figure standing ahead of him on the sidewalk. It was Aliana. She was standing still, her gaze fixed on the city in front of her as if she were waiting for him. He slowed his pace and walked towards her, unsure of what to say. She turned to face him as he approached, her expression unreadable. "You've been thinking," she said softly. Ethan stopped in front of her and nodded. "I don't know what to do anymore. People are scared. There's so much fear and resistance. I feel like we're fighting against something we can't control." Aliana studied him for a moment, her violet eyes calm, almost knowing. "Fear is always the first reaction to change," she said, But it's just that reaction. Over time, the fear will fade. People will see that this isn't something to be afraid of. They will see the truth. Ethan shook his head. It's not that simple. You don't understand. These aren't just random people who don't know what's going on. These are people who have lived their whole lives with certain beliefs, with certain ideas of what the world is. And now you're asking them to accept something they don't understand. They're scared because they don't know what's coming next. I don't know what's coming next. Eliana placed a hand on his shoulder, her touch surprisingly comforting. I understand more than you think, Ethan. My people have faced resistance before, but we've always moved forward because we know what we're doing is right. We are creating a future not just for us but for all beings. This isn't just about the hybrids, it's about something bigger. It's about unity, peace, and understanding, but those things take time. Ethan stared at her, the weight of her words sinking in. You think we can convince them, convince everyone that this is the right thing to do? Eliana smiled softly. Not everyone will be convinced, not at first, but it only takes a few who are willing to take the leap, a few who will lead the way. And as more people see the truth, they will join. That's how change works. Ethan was silent for a moment, taking in what she had said. He had always believed in progress, in the idea that things could get better. But this was unlike anything he had ever imagined. It wasn't just about making life easier or better. It was about reshaping the very nature of what it meant to be human. And that was terrifying. But as he stood there with Eliana's calm presence beside him, he realized that maybe fear was part of the journey. Change wasn't easy. It never had been, but perhaps it was necessary. If he truly wanted to help guide humanity into a better future, then he had to face that fear head-on. He couldn't wait for the world to be ready. He had to be the one to lead the way. I'm in, he said, his voice steady. Eliana looked at him, her smile widening. I knew you would be. As the days passed, Ethan threw himself fully into the work. The project moved forward slowly but steadily. He worked with Eliana and the others to help prepare for the first stage of integration. The hybrids were being created slowly, carefully. Each one was unique, a blend of human and alien traits, but all of them held the promise of something new, something better. Ethan found himself growing more and more connected to this cause, to the idea that this was bigger than anything he had ever known. He spent less time worrying about the resistance and more time focusing on what he could do to help. There were still protests, still fears, still doubts. But with each passing day, the small victories began to add up. People who had once been against the project started asking questions, seeking answers. Some even began to come forward, offering their support. The road was long, and the work was far from finished, but Ethan felt a sense of peace that had eluded him for so long. He had found his purpose, and he was ready to fight for it. This wasn't just about creating hybrids or bridging two species. It was about creating a new world, a world built on understanding, cooperation, and the belief that humanity was capable of so much more than it had ever realized. One evening, after a long day of meetings, Eliana found Ethan standing on the balcony of his apartment, staring out at the city. The lights below seemed to stretch on forever, the city alive with energy. You've come a long way, Eliana said, joining him at the railing. Ethan looked at her, a small smile tugging at his lips. I have, haven't I? I never thought I'd be here, but I'm glad I am. Eliana nodded. And you're not alone, we're all in this together. Ethan looked out at the city, a sense of purpose settling in his chest. The road ahead was still uncertain, but he knew one thing for sure. He was ready. Ready to lead, ready to face whatever challenges came his way, and ready to help create a future that could change everything. And with that, he stepped forward, knowing that the journey had just begun.